Hinckley was absent-mindedly scratching her scars when the message was brought to her. She looked up at her strange new assistant. She had promised to stop calling him Flipper, but honestly she couldn't pronounce his name. His people had evolved to live between the sea and the sand, the language half dolphin squeaks and half breathy roars. Frankly, it gave her a headache. She smiled, perfectly well aware that the human habit of baring her teeth at him was unnerving. So we have a diplomat on the way from Earth. This should be interesting. She thought for a moment. Don't we own some buildings from our first attack? Find the dampest and announce that we are presenting them with an embassy as a sign of goodwill. Flipper growled an emotion that basically translated as, "Why are you doing this to me?" She grinned again. "Don't worry, Earth will live with it. It comes with the whole Diplo thing. They will work out that it's a pointed reminder that this is a Xeno planet regardless of who's currently in charge. I mean, it's practically the most expensive land I own." She waved him out and added quietly, "And those fuckers can get their feet wet for once." Master Sergeant Elysium was currently paddling around his new house. He knew that his fellow humans thought him odd, but he enjoyed the tide rolling into his kitchen, the feeling of being free to simply swim out into the endless deep. He laughed at himself. Anyone trying to do this with Earth's moon wouldn't last a day, but here with its silly little satellite, it was like a lake. He had been told this was what the Mediterranean had been like before they drained it. Occasionally a storm would mean that he had to close the doors, but otherwise he was enjoying the experience. He had tried to persuade the men, but alas they preferred the hillsides to settle down on. The captain had handed out the land and money like some ancient benevolent monarch, and had granted estates, rights, and weapons to all her people. He still wasn't sure that she had meant to do it, but she had built another army, maybe even a sect or religion. It had never even occurred to her to let her people suffer if she had the power to help. He practiced his new language, growling out, "And how did that end for Alexander?" he asked himself. Earth diplomatic mission en route to Walking Waters. Ambassador Sisek was silently cursing his way through the actual history between Earth and Hinckley. Even for an old hand at the curious arts of destroying your enemies with circumstance and timing, he had never seen such a botched effort to solve a minor issue using nukes. He had tried to read between the lines, but much of this report was nonsense. She had survived Minehead, mysteriously been abandoned on the Sijek homeworld again, only to destroy their entire infrastructure through /classified/, and then had been effortlessly erased from history while sinking the careers of nearly every senior command member involved. The Earth's government had replaced damn near everyone that had so much as touched a mission that Hinckley had been involved in. He could only find 2 survivors of the purge, and they weren't saying much. A kindly and anonymous note had found its way to one of his staff. "Walk softly, and don't think for a moment she can't find a bigger stick, and be sure she will use it first if you threaten her people. She was the best of us, and all we did was give her reasons to hate. Never, ever lie to her." While he appreciated the sentiment that was unlikely to work in the diplomatic service, it had taken him nearly 20 minutes to trace back the message to the response Marine Command. The commander had sent him a message in the only way he could, and no doubt he would send guns in to back it up if he needed to. He sighed and returned to his intel. If she had friends like that, his mission was dead before he had left Earth, unless he moved the goalposts a little. He grinned to himself. He was going to make a play that would never occur to anyone in his field. He was going to tell the truth and then roll the dice on the result. He had never met the woman, but she sounded interesting. Hinckley left her desk and began to roam around her stupidly large palace. The Water Walkers had a legacy that was as Byzantine and outright weird as anything Earth had ever done since Byzantium. She was now the ruler of some strange people by the design of the previous ruler, and she had decided to make it stick. She was in the process of buying up every mercenary company and quietly adding them to her list of the invisible army that she would need soon enough. She had been keeping careful track of the assholes that had been hoarding heavy weapons. She had made a deal with the smugglers that was very simple. Her men had turned out with swords drawn and bayonets fitted and asked those who remained alive to inform her of any future shipments, and they had agreed. Now Earth was on the way. Today might be a day to remind people of why she had this palace in the first place. She called the good doctor. "Sarge, I need you to pick out a team. 300 men should be enough, and I'm sending you the intel. We trashed the place and grabbed the new weapons they are so proud of. Make it loud as you like. Get back to me when you have a plan. I'd come with you, but I'll be busy with the new ambassador for a while, so feel free to start whenever you're ready. Come find me at the office when you are done." Sergeant Elysium read the message and then translated it in his head. "Get the boys together and kill these fuckers. They have heavy weapons that they are not supposed to have. Also, I have Earth on the way, so let's put on a show for them. Bring me the heads of my enemies." The attack was straightforward enough. His orders had taken 20 minutes. His men took another hour to equip, and 3 hours hugging the ground as they flew to get close enough to drop the local forces into the water as he and his men landed in the hills behind the target. He dropped his HUD and let Hinckley join the conversation. "Well, boss, looks like you had the geography right at least. How do you want this to play out?" She sat at her desk, feeling incongruous wearing her battle helmet. "This company has been bringing in heavy plasma weapons from the old empire. I thought they were just another bunch of Miltech assholes until I couldn't find their buyer. They aren't selling it on, and that's just rude. It makes it look like they are planning to throw a party that we aren't invited to. I had been planning to gatecrash anyway, but today is a good day for them to die. Usual rules. If it holds a weapon, it dies. Burn the place to the ground when you have recovered the guns. Call me if you need more men or, an orbital bombardment. I need an example more than I need survivors." She cut the feed. She had always hated meetings where the boss never went offline. She trusted him to get it done. She quietly added and published her new war and its target and goals on the net. Nice and legal. As Despot of Despots, all she needed to do was declare that it was in the public interest to make it official. Of course, that was only the start of the argument, but she felt that the sergeant would carry the rest of the conversation. The news feeds picked up the story at about the same time as 150 humans ripped apart the building, and about the same number of locals swarmed the hidden arms dumps so carefully concealed in the deep. The fighting was exactly what you would expect from a professional army meeting a militia with a mission. All the flags, all the plans, and all the attitude died in a hail of well-placed fire from an army that believed in one thing, and one thing alone. Fuck with the captain and you will die. Some of the older men drew their swords and moved to finish the job. She waited about 10 minutes before her press person started banging on the door. She smiled because he was trying to do it politely. She must remember to include him in the plans next time. She opened the door from her desk. "Yes, I know. I'll do all the interviews. Let the press in here and I'll give them an hour." The press secretary was already beside himself. "Sire, I simply need you to release an update, or at least tell me what you want them to know." Hinckley took her helmet off the desk. "Just send them in one at a time. Oh, and bring a chair for them." The first one in the room must have had claws of steel because she was unknown to Hinckley. From the color of her fur, she was around the same age as herself. There must be a fair few bloodied seniors in the waiting chamber. She started by introducing herself. "Sire, I am Penninsword, or just Pen to most of the humans. Can you tell us why you launched an attack today? Is this the start of the human invasion we have feared? Is it true that your human overlord arrives today?" Hinckley remembered not to open her mouth when she smiled. "Pen, this operation has been months in the planning. In fact, the only reason I am not there is that I have to meet the human ambassador as a matter of courtesy. The attack, as you call it, was simply a response to a group of fanatics and a stockpile of smuggled weapons that should never be used on our streets. They chose to arm themselves with the worst weapons that the Psyjack Empire had to offer, and are now getting the opportunity they wanted to try to use them against my people." She turned to the screen in her office and connected it to her HUD. "Would you like to see how that plays out?" Hinckley adjusted her chair and turned up the volume. Pen wanted action, so let it be at battlefield-level noise. It had always annoyed her that the training field mush that she had been fed as a raw recruit ignored the smell and the noise. She connected the sergeant's HUD to the screen and turned to the journalist. "Sorry, Pen, I won't be giving orders today. The men already know what to do. The only thing I'm waiting for is the price we paid to keep these scum off our streets. I'll send you the official debrief when we are done. Feel free to ask your questions." Penninsworth rapidly explained to her viewers what was happening, interrupting her network while a dozen interns scrambled to create graphics and sell ads. "Despot, please explain what I'm seeing." On screen, the confusing HUD of the sergeant carried a lot of icons and lights that would be unfamiliar to her, but Hinckley was feeling charitable. "I'll be honest, to learn every icon would take you a couple of weeks. To work out what is important right now takes command experience. The next level is commanding after someone has shot you and your HUD doesn't work." She smiled, the scars clear on her face. She pointed at the top line of lights. Those are life signs. If I lose someone or they get hurt, that is where you will see it. The sergeant is also our doctor, so expect him to pay close attention to it. The blue lights are your people fighting underwater under the command of Sergeant Flipper. He has his own problems, and those would be harder for me to explain. Again, you can have the debrief later. Master Sergeant Elysium is responsible for the human forces right now. I hope I have made all that clear. Penn hesitated. Her network had been really keen to play up the threat of the humans, and combat footage would be useful, but a despot of despots that was open to the press was unheard of. She had been handed a single chance to build her career out of stone. Hinckley smiled to herself, astonished that the advice of her battle lawyer was being so successful. He had advised her that if she dragged them on side, watching from her perspective, then they would only see her enemies as their own enemies. High-stakes battle footage from the human perspective would be educational for her new citizens. Elysium was currently swearing loudly as the men planted the ordnance to blow the doors. A different squad was emplacing the heavy plasma, and his gunships in the air were both scouting and scanning the building. The low-level streams of information and flashing lights were constant, and to the innocent eye, overwhelming. "Get the drones out! I want every one of those fuckers mapped and identified. Tell the friggin' mermaids to get a move on!" Suddenly the screen splintered into a dozen viewpoints as the drones activated. Smaller than the palm of your hand, they launched from the suits of his men and began scanning. Hinckley punched a button, and the screen narrowed to a single view again. "The sergeant will work his way through those, as will the men. We can go back when he flags something important. For now, I will just pick one and show you how it works." She centered the screen on a single drone that was scanning the building. It lit up one of the combatants, a local. A screed of information began passing, some in code. Hinckley slowed it down. "So those first 9 numbers are just his place in the building. X, Y, Z axis. The next is an ID of the weapon he is holding. That's a light plasma fast-fire Sci-Jet model 440, illegal for civilian use. Those next numbers are matching any ID that he is carrying against our intel database. Bank, comms, whatever he has in his pockets. The last is his clothing, composition, color, type. Looking for logos, points of sale, anything really. If he has comms, we will crack them for stored numbers, messages, buried networks. Right now, more intel power is focused on this individual than at any point in his existence. The result will appear shortly. This will tell us if he is trained in weapons, and if he has offended previously, or if he is simply a merc in the wrong place." Penn was trying to keep up. "And what will you do with all this information?" Hinckley nodded slowly. "That is the big question. Carrying that weapon is a 10-year sentence unless he fires it when it becomes attempted murder of an agent of the court. That's the last rites as far as my men are concerned. Then we measure if the offense was political or personal. Political can be tricky. This obviously looks political, but he may have suffered by our arrival here in the battles I undertook to secure my position. That would indicate mercy. This is why we rely on intel so much. Hang on and we will have an answer. I must insist that you hold this element secret until you receive the debrief." Sensing another angle, Penn pushed. "Why? Do you plan to disappear him? Interrogate him?" She was satisfied that the human looked genuinely shocked. "Penn, I may have to kill this man in a moment because he has made some bad choices, and he is prepared to pay for them with his life. I will extract that cost for the good of my people, but I do not intend to kill him in front of his family on a live broadcast. You can record the events, but you will not display any of the intel provided. Clear?" Numbers continued to flood in. Unknown to any of the Xenos, everything was hitting the Shiva orbital, mankind's top-of-the-line military intel orbital. Current owner, 1X Captain Hinckley. As she and the journalist watched, a final number came up on the target. Hinckley sighed. Convicted for armed threats, unlicensed for weapons, anti-human extremist, Sci-Jet conscript, threat response lethal. Even as she spoke, Elysium was sending heavy plasma against the position. The numbers stopped, and the drone returned to searching. She looked at Penn. "Threat response lethal means that he will shoot to kill. It doesn't always mean we want him dead. However, we are dealing with over 100 of this sect, and I will not risk my men if possible. The sergeant knows that." The drones continued the implacable math that fed the human response. Most flashed up as lethal response, but not all. Hinckley was glad to see one flash yellow. She slowed it down again. This one is capture, non-lethal response. His intel reads as a medic or some kind of medical professional. He is carrying a weapon below the damage rating of our combat suits, so we estimate he can be recovered safely. Also, my doctor tends to use a certain amount of professional courtesy when dealing with these situations. Penninsword was trying to narrate what she was seeing. Her inexperience in dealing with the military or even the despot herself was showing, but she was damned if she was going to let this go, even if she made mistakes. The human seemed to be genuinely happy to explain what was happening and why. It was the why that grabbed her attention. Her audience knew that the humans were great warriors, but no one had ever explained why, or anything really. They had simply crushed their enemies and gone home, back into the multitude of races competing in this new galaxy. To suddenly get to see the calm and analytical approach based on nothing but the current reality was as close to an explanation as she had ever got. This human was never afraid, not like she would be. She was obviously worried about her people, but she was not going to be defeated. She went moment to moment trying to use her best judgment on the situation. My viewers have some questions, do you mind? Hinckley turned down the volume. I believe most of the action is over for now. The rest is rescue and recovery, then intel. The boring stuff. Penn hesitated. Excuse me, Despot, but rescue of whom exactly? Perhaps I am wrong, but your men seemed unhurt. Hinckley continued. Sure, some minor stuff being dealt with. The rescue and recovery is everyone else. Anyone that survived the battle will be treated and arrested. The weapons will be seized and destroyed, and the intel will continue to flow. I will eventually track down everyone, and they will pay the price for their stupidity. I will tolerate no challenge to the law except me. That's the job description the previous despot of despots left for me. Hinckley flipped the camera to Sergeant Fipper and nodded at the screen. These are the weapons that we recovered. The picture showed box after box being brought to the surface. She recognized some of the weapons. Some of them were presumably antiques, sold on by some happy merc. They would all be analyzed and put into service or destroyed. She could see that the journalist deep in her own work, trying to explain what she had seen. Wow, she had created the first war correspondent of the water people. Her helmet flashed a private message from the sergeant. All clear. She took a moment to make sure that the target was on widescreen and ordered the flyboys to level the place. Penn, you might need to see this. Any corp that attacks the government will fall to this. Believe it or not, this is your oldest law. Don't worry, there is no one alive in there. Her engineers had had plenty of time to play with this stuff, so they launched a cascade bomb. As it fell, it shattered the building one floor at a time. It left only dust. Hinckley turned from the screens. So, Penn, any questions?